The year was 1891, after the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, and the winds of change swept across the vast lands of Tanganyika. In the southern highlands, a people known as the Hehe lived quietly, tending to their fields and celebrating their unity under the wise and fearless leadership of their chief, Mkwawa. Yet peace was fleeting, for a shadow loomed on the horizon. The Germans, with their soldiers and their hunger for control, had come to claim the land. Mkwawa had not always been the warrior he became. As a young man, he learned the art of leadership from his father, Munyigumba, who had forged the Hehe into a powerful and unified kingdom. When Mkwawa inherited the throne, he did so with the determination to defend his people against any threat. And so, when word came that the Germans were marching inland, planting flags as they went, Mkwawa gathered his warriors.
"These are not men who come in peace,"
he said one evening, standing before his people under the orange glow of the setting sun.
"They seek to take what is ours. But we are Hehe. Our ancestors fought for this land, and we will not let it be taken without a fight."
The first encounter between the Hehe and the Germans took place in August 1891 at Lugalo area, a narrow pass hidden by dense forest. Mkwawa, with his keen mind for strategy, had studied the Germans' movements. He knew they marched in columns, their weapons at the ready, but their spirits untested. On the morning of the ambush, Mkwawa and his warriors waited silently in the brush. As the Germans entered the pass, the Hehe struck. They emerged like shadows from the trees, their war cries echoing off the cliffs. Armed with spears, shields, and an unbreakable will, the Hehe overwhelmed the invaders. By the end of the day, more than 300 German soldiers lay dead, including their leader Emil von Zelewski. The Hehe's victory was swift and absolute, and for a moment the land was theirs once more. But the Germans were not a people to be defeated so easily. Humiliated, they returned with reinforcements, more soldiers, more guns, and the resolve to crush the Hehe. They attacked Kalenga, the heart of Mkwawa's kingdom. Kalenga was a fortress like no other, its walls thick and unyielding. Inside, Mkwawa and his people prepared for the siege, knowing it would be their toughest battle yet. The Germans came with cannons, their deafening booms shattering the air. The Hehe fought bravely, but their spears were no match for the invaders' firepower. After days of relentless bombardment, Kalenga fell. The Germans burned the city, and many of Mkwawa's warriors were captured or killed. But Mkwawa himself escaped into the hills, vowing to continue the fight. For years, Mkwawa waged a guerrilla war against the Germans. He knew the hills and forests better than his enemies and used the land to his advantage. His warriors struck German outposts in the dead of night, sabotaged supply lines, and disappeared before the enemy could retaliate. But the Germans adapted. They had resources that Mkwawa could not match, endless supplies of food, ammunition, and reinforcements. They began to employ brutal tactics, targeting the villages that supported Mkwawa and using captured Hehe as guides to track him down. Slowly, the Hehe resistance began to weaken. Several factors led to the Hehe's downfall during the guerrilla war. First, the Germans' advanced weaponry gave them an overwhelming advantage. Rifles, machine guns, and cannons allowed them to fight from a distance, making it harder for Mkwawa's warriors to close the gap. Second, the Germans' strategy of scorched earth, burning villages, destroying crops, and punishing those who aided the Hehe, cut off Mkwawa's support network. Supplies dwindled, and his people suffered. Finally, the Hehe were outnumbered. The Germans could call on reinforcements from the coast and other colonies, while Mkwawa's forces, isolated in the hills, could not grow in strength. Despite these challenges, Mkwawa refused to surrender. His determination inspired his warriors, who fought on even as hope began to fade. By 1898, Mkwawa was a hunted man. The Germans had placed a bounty on his head, and their soldiers scoured the land for him. In July of that year, they cornered him in a cave near Mlambalasi. Inside, Mkwawa sat quietly, his rifle resting against the wall. He could hear the Germans outside, their voices growing louder as they closed in. He knew the end had come. Taking his rifle, he spoke to his remaining followers.
They may take my life, but they will never take the spirit of the Hehe.
With that, Mkwawa turned the weapon on himself, choosing death over capture. When the Germans found Mkwawa's body, they chopped apart the body and took his head as a trophy, sending it to Germany as a symbol of their victory. But what they could not take was the legacy he left behind. The skull was sent to Germany, a practice common in the colonial era, where such items were displayed in museums or studied under pseudoscientific racial theories. For decades, the skull remained in Germany, a silent witness to the horrors of colonization and the defiance of a people. In 1919, after Germany's defeat in World War I, Tanganyika became a British mandate under the League of Nations. During this period, the Hehe and other Tanzanians began calling for the return of their lost heritage, including Mkwawa's skull. The demand gained significant traction during the negotiations for Tanganyika's independence in the 1950s. The British administration and Tanganyikan leaders argued that returning the skull would honor the Hehe people's struggle and symbolize a new era of respect for African history and culture. Interestingly, Mkwawa's skull was referenced in the Treaty of Versailles, 1919, which ended World War I. Article 246 of the treaty stated,
"Within 6 months, Germany must restore to the British government the skull of the Sultan Mkwawa, which was removed from the Protectorate of German East Africa and taken to Germany."
This clause was an acknowledgement of the atrocities committed during colonial rule and a nod to the importance of African leaders like Mkwawa in resisting foreign domination. However, the return was delayed due to bureaucratic hurdles and the complexities of post-war Europe. In the early 1950s, as Tanganyika prepared for independence, Julius Nyerere and other leaders reignited the call for the skull's return. Pressure mounted on Germany to fulfill its obligation under the Treaty of Versailles. German officials began searching for the skull in museums and private collections. After extensive efforts, they located a skull believed to be Mkwawa's in Bremen. While some skeptics questioned its authenticity, the historical and symbolic value of the gesture overshadowed doubts. In 1954, the German government officially returned Mkwawa's skull to Tanganyika. A ceremony was held in Kalenga, the Hehe stronghold, and the site of Mkwawa's former fortress. The return of the skull was an emotional moment for the Hehe people and all Tanzanians. The skull was placed in a small museum in Kalenga town, where it remains to this day, a symbol of resistance, courage, and the enduring spirit of the Hehe people.